Oliver Blanchard is with us, Research Director at Futurum Group. Thank you for being with us. I mean, we can get to some of the specific names that sold off in a big way. What did you think about the last 24 hours?
Hey, Nicole, thanks for having me back on. Happy New Year. First time in January, so good to see you again. So what happened yesterday, obviously, was a huge disruption for the markets. But I don't think it's really about DeepSeek. This is something that you and I have been talking about for several months now. And I think the bigger story here is the expansion of AI workloads, and that's training and inference from the cloud to the edge. And what we're seeing is essentially a confluence of two things. One, the models are becoming much more efficient, which means that it's a lot faster to train the models. And it also requires a lot less computational power, less energy, less water, all of these resources that we normally assign to big, heavy AI training workloads. So that's because of these efficiency improvements, we're seeing less and less need for this. And then the other thing is the chips are also becoming much more efficient, which is kind of like the idea behind NVIDIA's Blackwell. They're much better chips. They're a little bit still expensive on the upfront, but on the back end, in terms of the operational costs, you're getting a lot more ROI because these chips can perform a lot better. So better software, better training, more efficient models, and also more efficient chips. And what DeepSeek has done essentially is sort of shown the possibility of what can be done with this. So I don't know that we'll even be speaking or talking about DeepSeek 6 months from now, but we will be talking about this broader theme of the efficiency, the improving efficiency of models and chips, essentially being a sort of a much lower cost alternative to the way that we're thinking about AI training and even in infrastructure investments now.
Interesting, because I was reading about the founder, the 40-year-old founder in China of DeepSeek, and throughout, what he's been doing. But it was cited that he had said at some point the models were trained on fewer than 10,000 NVIDIA A100 GPUs, and so the question is, we've seen pushback from Elon Musk and others. Then I read today that they weren't using NVIDIA chips, but you talk about training and you talk about inference. Is there any way to know whether or not NVIDIA helped to make DeepSeek? Because that could help NVIDIA too, right? I mean, that could mean more demand for NVIDIA. And I know that we're going to get to how maybe we're not looking at this the right way, but just that little fun fact, important fact. Do you know anything about that?
Well, no, not yet. And I don't want to speculate about which chips were used. It's kind of not really relevant. It'll be interesting if it's NVIDIA chips or not. Maybe it's a mix of NVIDIA chips and other chips. They're not the only player in town. But I think what's interesting is it is a proof point for the increasing efficiency of the models themselves and the increased efficiency of the chips themselves. And NVIDIA there, ironically, is you're showing some of the losses yesterday. NVIDIA is really well positioned to take advantage of these more efficient models. And I think that if we reset the conversation back, if we go back before yesterday's announcements and sell-off, and we go back before the previous week, so last week's announcement of the Stargate infrastructure investment project, and go back to what Jensen was saying at CES about what NVIDIA was working on and what the product roadmap was and the revenue roadmap, I think that's still on target. Nothing has changed. It's just we raised our expectations last week with Stargate in terms of investments, and then DeepSeek basically just pulled the rug out from under that, saying, no, you don't need to invest that much. But fundamentally, what NVIDIA was saying 2 weeks ago is still true. You still have this expansion of AI training and inference. You have this expansion of it in the cloud and at the edge and to endpoints. And so we're entering into a more hybrid AI training and workload model that still benefits NVIDIA. It's just, last week's numbers, I think, were a little bit inflated.
So I do want to get to so many points, and I do want folks to leave this interview and say, wait, well, I might want to buy this stock because I really like what they're working on, or I like the idea of Stargate overall, or whatever. So let's try and fire through some things. The first is the whole Stargate rally. the money that can be raised for that, we're at 100 billion, it's going to 500 billion. I mean, theoretically, that dollar can go longer, right? Because if this DeepSeek is more efficient or whatever, you can use that. We could be more efficient here at home too. Maybe it's good news.
I think it is good news. Yeah, it's nice. I think that Stargate felt a little bit like as close to a blank check as you can get for the AI infrastructure investments that we need to do. One, to expand the space and also to be more competitive against China and some of our international or global rivals. But I think that this efficiency thing works really well. So on the spend itself, if we have to spend, we can work on other things that also help the broader infrastructure. So whether it's investing in nuclear again, or upgrading our water management systems and redirecting, basically upgrading a lot of our data centers, we're all good on that. But it also means that maybe we don't have to spend that much, and we can spend a lot of that stuff on R&D. We can spend it on other things. It doesn't have to be building giant data centers that may not be that may not need to be quite as big as we think they are. And I think that we're looking at an infrastructure spend that is adequate for 2025, but not necessarily for where we'll be in 2030, if that makes sense.
So, yeah, as a research director, I mean, you're doing way more research than any of us on, these particular names. Qualcomm is a name you talked a lot about over the last 12 months. Curious, are these buys? Is Qualcomm a buy? NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, or other names that you follow closely. Would you say any in your mind, whether it's the valuation and or some of the creativity that they have going forward, which ones are buys?
All right, so we've already talked about NVIDIA, NVIDIA having a really good roadmap and a really good position, so I'm not worried about them. I think AMD is interesting. I've seen, unpopular opinion maybe. I've seen some financial analysts sort of downgrade them a little bit. I think they have a really good play in data center and also in endpoint, so basically client PC. I like where they're going with their technology. And I think that on the device side, so basically anything that's edge and device, so endpoints, that's mobile, PC, XR, automotive. I really like Qualcomm always, just because they're so good at the ARM-based, sort of like low power, high output AI chips in all of these segments. But also MediaTek is another one that I'm looking at. And I think Broadcom is also kind of like a sleeper in this. We don't really talk about Broadcom enough, but I think they've got some plays coming next year, especially as IoT enabled by AI. So mainly smart cameras and smart drones. I think Broadcom is also going to have an advantage there. So those are kind of like the 5 technology companies that I'm looking at the most right now, and that feel like they're on the right track.
Yeah, so it sounded like Broadcom, Qualcomm, NVIDIA, and AMD were the buys. Intel, you didn't necessarily say buy it. While they have some great capabilities, you seem like a little more on the sidelines for that one.
Well, Intel's going through some things, right? There's a change of leadership. I have full confidence in their leadership team now. I think they're in really good shape, but they have some decisions to make. They kind of fell behind on a few things. There have been some few misses that they're still catching up on. For me, Intel is kind of like it's wait and see. Like, never bet against Intel. I think they're a really strong company. They're vital to this ecosystem. They're doing some really great things. I think they're caught up when it comes to the AI PC race, and they moved a lot faster than a lot of people expected them to. But we'll see. Let's wait and see what happens in the next 3 months with Intel.
Yeah. Quickly, do you think the U.S. can be the AI leader?
Sure. I mean, that's an interesting, very broad question. I think that, yes, I mean, currently the U.S. is the AI leader. I think that China is a very close second. There are areas where China might be a little bit ahead of the U.S. and vice versa. But I think that we're basically looking at 2 AI superpowers right now. It's U.S. versus China for the most part in terms of development of AI solutions and also being able to scale. But yes, I think right now the U.S. might be able to maintain its leadership. But we'll see how China fares in the next year. But obviously, China's not down for the count. They're definitely still working on really interesting stuff and have challenged expectations this week, and good for them. Competition's good.
Yeah, it'll keep everybody on their toes, I guess.
Yep.
I mean, people who lost a lot of money yesterday didn't like it, that's for sure. Oliver Blanchard, great to see you. Good week to have you on here. Futurum Group, thank you so much. Great to see you. Thanks, and Happy New Year to you as well.